Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Admittedly, we are filming this before episode 1 airs, but I'm just going to say in advance, thank you so much for all the support, guys. Yeah, any support that we've already had on Instagram and Twitter has been amazing anyway. We've already seen all that, and that's brilliant. We really appreciate it. And of course, when episode 1 goes out, or just when it comes to our social media, we are going to be very active, replying to any questions or comments or whatever. So, again, with this episode, just send all your questions, your comments, whatever you have, onto our YouTube comments, our Instagram page, our Twitter page, wherever you want to send them, and we'll answer them for sure. Of course, this week, yet again, I am joined by my co-host, not guest host, my co-host, Shane.
Hi everyone.
And this week we are covering Foreign Correspondent. Yes, so the plan is, of course, it may be interrupted by the odd special episode, but for the time being, the plan is to do all of Alfred Hitchcock's 1940s films chronologically. So, his second one, which also came out in 1940, because our Alfred was a bit of a grafter, is Foreign Correspondent. Shane, what do you know about Foreign Correspondent heading into this?
I didn't know anything about Foreign Correspondent heading into this. So I watched it, figured out that we have Joel McCrea playing John Jones. We have Lorraine Day playing Carol Fisher. We have Herbert Marshall playing Stephen Fisher. And we have George Sanders, who appeared in Rebecca as Rebecca's cousin. We have him as Scott Folliott.
Yes. We'll get to it when we get to it, but that actually gives probably my favorite joke in the whole movie. But anyway,
definitely.
We'll come to that when we come to it. The film was nominated for 6 Academy Awards. This was a big year for Alfred and his Academy Awards because he had Rebecca as well, which won Best Picture. This also was nominated for Best Picture, but it didn't win. It was a financial. How do you say? It was the second biggest film in Britain that year, yet it made a loss. So, I don't know. Is that successful? I don't know. If you look at it on Wikipedia or whatever, it will look like it made a profit, but that's because Wikipedia hasn't factored in like advertising and stuff. It did make like a near 400 grand loss, but was the second biggest film in cinemas in Britain. Hitchcock does tend to say that the Americans at the time weren't big into their thrillers. They viewed thrillers as B movies, and that's why maybe this didn't be as successful in America as some of his next American films, because this is, of course, Hitchcock's second film in America, although not produced by David O. Selznick. No, it is produced by Walter Wanger, who shot his wife's agent. Fun fact, because he thought they were having an affair. And Selznick actually wouldn't give Hitchcock Joan Fontaine, who starred in Rebecca, he wouldn't give her to Hitchcock for this film. And the big issue that Hitchcock seems to have with this film, or had with this film, was the casting. He says on numerous occasions that he wished he had bigger stars in this. Gary Cooper turned down the film. Gary Cooper from High Noon, amongst other things, turned down the film. So we got Joel McCrea. But we do have two sort of legends in their own right. One of them will come to him when he's in it because he's a bit of a cameo, and the other one actually got nominated for the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in this film. Can you tell me, Shane, unless you already know this, which of these guys got nominated for Best Supporting Actor?
Albert Basserman as Van Meer. Had to check.
Yeah, I'll be honest, he has like one monologue in the film. He's not really in it that much. I don't know. What do you think about him getting nominated for Best Supporting Actor? He's not really in it that much.
He's not, but it's a hell of a monologue. Plus, I think the scene in the car at the start of the film is pretty good. Like, it's kind of comical. It also helps us to know more about his character. Look, it didn't win Best Supporting Actor, and I think that's probably for the best, but I can understand why it was nominated at least.
Yeah, Albert Basserman, fun fact about him. So in Germany, there's this big award that is a big deal. Sorry, it's not just Germany, it's for German speaking actors. It's called the Ifland Ring. And basically, the best living German actor is the receiver of the Ifland Ring. And then when it comes to the time that they're going to die, they then choose their successor. It's been going on since the 19th century, but our boy Albert here is the only Ifland ring recipient to not choose his, how do you say, successor, because he thought the ring was cursed. Because whilst he was alive, he picked his successor, who then died before him. So then he picked another successor who died before him. So then he picked one last successor and said, "This is it."
No.
And yeah, you guessed it, that guy died before him as well. So then at that guy's funeral, Basserman took the ring off and threw it on the casket, hoping that it would get burnt with the casket. Some Austrian dude saved the ring and tried to give it back to him. He refused to take it back. And yeah, then whenever Basserman died, a committee had to pick the guy who got the ring after Basserman. And then, you know, it just kept going as it was. He was the only guy who seemed to think it was cursed. But yeah, fun fact about Albert Basserman, who I can't imagine is going to be mentioned on the podcast more than that. So yeah, I just thought I'd get that fun fact out of the way.
Apparently, he didn't speak much English at all, so he learnt his lines phonetically, which is actually more impressive in a way. And
yeah, didn't
maybe
Ana
just
de Armas do that as well?
Yeah, she did, didn't she? Yeah. So yeah, but maybe that justifies his supporting actor nomination a little bit more as well.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong, Albert Basserman, I'm sure he's a legend, but yeah, I was just surprised because, in my opinion, anyway, he's not even the best supporting performance in the film.
No, that's definitely George Sanders.
Yes, George Sanders is class, but again, he's kind of in the film. Like he shows up at the start, but he's more into it in the end. So we'll talk about that when we talk about it. Anyway, let's get into Foreign Correspondent. Right, so the film Foreign Correspondent opens with a dedication to foreign correspondents. Basically, the film centers around a guy called John Jones. No, not that John Jones, who is played by Joel McCrea. He is not particularly amazing correspondent, I would say, and his boss kind of wants to send him across the world in like a Carl Pilkington sort of role because he loves the fact that he has no experience or clue that there is a literal world war looming. He's just like oblivious to it. So this guy's like, perfect, that's the guy I want to report on this. So yeah, he sends Mr. Jones under the pseudonym Huntley Haverstock, because apparently that's a better name for a reporter. It's catchier, is Huntley Haverstock, all the way over to, yes, in Alfred Hitchcock's second American film, back to England, because good old Alfred, well, I think he might have been homesick. And yeah, John Jones meets a guy called Stebbins, who, I'll forgive you if you don't remember who Stebbins is, but Stebbins is the guy who kind of shows him around London to begin with. Basically, he's just there to introduce us to the rest of the characters. We find about Van Meer, who's this Dutch diplomat who's given this speech. And at this speech, at this lunch, there's also a guy called Stephen Fisher, who is the head of, what are they called? The United...
I didn't even take that, no. Yeah, I'm not too sure.
It's the UN. It's basically the UN. It's Hitchcock's version of the UN. The United Frontier for Peace and Prosperity or something. And yeah, so basically on the way to the lunch, John Jones, or Huntley Haverstock, gets in a taxi with Van Meer by pure coincidence. He just kind of sees him and is like, oh, I'll just go with that guy. And they get chatting. And yeah, Shane, what do they get chatting about in this taxi?
John Jones is basically trying to find out information from Van Meer. Van Meer initially doesn't realise he's a journalist, so he offers some information about Fisher. Eventually he cottons onto the fact that he's a journalist, so he starts to keep stum. And then we get to the actual dinner itself, or the actual gathering itself, I suppose.
Yeah, so at this gathering, John Jones, through some random Latvian guy, meets Carol Fisher, who is fluent in Latvian for some reason. And Van Meer no-shows the lunch, even though we just saw him in a taxi with John Jones. So that's hella suspicious. And yeah, apparently he did this whole pre-written note saying that he wasn't going to make it, and he was devastated that he wasn't going to make it, even though we just saw him in a taxi. So instantly we're like right into the movie, and Hitchcock is hitting us with his typical thriller formula, which in this occasion or on this occasion works for me. I think it's a good thriller. I think Hitchcock's formula regularly does work when he's doing these thrillers, and this one's no different. So yeah, with Van Meer's no show, instead Carol Fisher is to do an announcement, but we get some big fake out where some girl who allegedly looks like a nerd, she just wears glasses. We all think that's going to be Carol Fisher, but no, Carol Fisher was actually the woman who we just met beforehand, who, I don't know, looks like the lead actress. And she gives this speech, but she kind of flumps it because she gets lost in Joel McCrea's eyes. And then we just kind of move along to the next peace meeting, because this film starts off as John Jones basically just taking tabs on all these peace meetings. And the next one is in Amsterdam. Fun fact time. On the way from filming from London to Amsterdam, the camera guy who had all the camera equipment, his ship got torpedoed. And all the camera equipment got destroyed. But he survived. So he had to go back to London and then buy a load more camera equipment for the studio and then get the boat back over, which delayed production. Because, yeah, this is 1940. We are very much in the midst of World War II, guys.
Yeah, and then after that, then we see a scene where Van Meer is trying to give a speech outside. A photographer comes to take his picture, but actually he's secretly carrying a gun. So he shoots Van Meer, assassinates him. There's a whole commotion. Then there's this really sick shootout scene. John Jones tries to follow the person's responsible. He jumps in a car with Carol Fisher, and this is the first time we see George Folio. And they end up coming up to a windmill. And this windmill is actually, this scene actually evoked kind of North by Northwest in my opinion, because it's like kind of eerie. There's not a lot going on. Some of the sounds that Hitchcock uses at this point, it's like just unsettling. There's something not going on, something that's not right.
Yeah, that shootout scene was class. I love the shot of all the umbrellas and like the drenching rain. The umbrellas look great. I'm pretty sure Hitchcock said it would have looked way better on color, but I don't know. I think it's a pretty cool visual of all these black umbrellas, and John Jones is chasing this photographer through them all. And yeah, on the journey to that windmill, we get probably the only particularly memorable line in the film for me anyway. It was a pretty funny back and forth when we first meet George Sanders' character, which was basically he spells his name with a lowercase double F.
Yeah.
And John Jones is like, why on earth would you do that? And he was like, oh, it's to do with Henry VIII, and he like murdered someone in my family, so I don't know. Anyway, so the good line in that scene is basically we see his name tag with the double FO double LIO double T, and John Jones just says, how do you pronounce that? Like with a stutter, and he just says no, it's just straight pho. And I don't know why I liked that line so much. It's a stupid line, but I got some enjoyment out of it. And yeah, at this windmill then, in typical Hitchcock fashion, where a innocent bystander gets involved in an intrigue, as Hitchcock would say, everybody kind of leaves John Jones to go and get the police because he doesn't speak any Dutch, so it would be pointless for him to go and get them. And he is convinced that because the windmill was turning one direction and then started turning the other direction, that was a signal for this plane in the distance to land at that windmill. So he goes inside the windmill just to check, and yeah, he sees the car that the assassin used to get away in. He sees the assassin meeting a couple of other guys, and we get a load of pretty typical Hitchcock master of suspense scenes here. John Jones is snooping around the windmill. He goes upstairs and we think he's going to get seen. He goes into this door, and yeah, in that door is Van Meer, alive and well. Well, he's not well, he's been drugged, but he's alive, which is not how he looked in the previous scene. And they kind of have a back and forth. I'll be honest, at this point I was convinced that Van Meer was the villain, because the body double thing is just stupid.
Yeah.
How did they find his doppelganger?
Yeah.
And then why did his doppelganger just agree to get assassinated? That is so... It just made no sense. I was just convinced that Van Meer was doing the whole, oh, I had a body double thing to try and get out of a situation. But no, he legit had a body double who got assassinated instead of him. Alright, Hitchcock. And basically, John Jones realizes that the only thing he can kind of do here is escape because, well, he's not going to bust this guy out anytime soon. There is plenty of guards. So he goes and tries to hide behind the gears that kind of power the windmill. I know windmills are powered by wind before you get at me in the comments, but the gears that are turning in the windmill, and his jacket gets caught in it, and we think he's going to get crushed, but he doesn't. And then the guards come in and we think he's going to get caught, but he doesn't. And then he escapes at the door, but then he's cornered and there's nowhere for him to go. But then the guy who was looking in the direction for him to escape decides to put a jumper on over his head, so luckily he escapes. It's kind of silly, but it's typical Hitchcock suspense scenes where if you get a couple of them in a row, it is just a bit of crack and it's enjoyable. But yeah, Jones does manage to get out of that windmill, and basically all he has discovered is Van Meer is very much still alive, and these other guys are keeping him hostage and have taken him away on a plane and drugged him.
Yeah, it's kind of playful as well, especially the scene where his coat nearly gets caught. We should say that up to this point as well, they've tried to establish a relationship between Joel McCrea's character, John Jones, and Carol Fisher, played by Lorraine Day. And like I said last week, the romance is kind of the one thing that I'd say that Hitchcock wasn't great at, especially early in his career. And it's good in Rebecca, and I'd say it's probably good in the 39 Steps at times as well, but it's not good in here either, because I just didn't buy it. I didn't care about the romance. It's rushed. We'll get to it in a while because we haven't got there yet, but they've tried to plant little seeds about, especially about John McCrea being infatuated towards Lorraine Day's character, and it just doesn't work for me. So then that's why when George Folio comes on the scene, he's just so much more charismatic, so much more witty than John Jones. So that's kind of as well why Joel McCrea's performance as John Jones doesn't fully work for me, especially early on.
Yeah, to be honest, the reason I didn't mention is because up until this point, I think they've had 2 conversations, so just keep that in mind. Because after Jones escapes the windmill, he goes back to his hotel where 2 guys are pretending to be police. He notices that they've cut his phone lines, so he pretends that he's stupid and playing along, but he escapes out his bathroom window and manages to get to the hotel room of Carol Fisher, and she just believes him that there's this big conspiracy that Van Meer is still alive, even though he's just climbed in her window. Yeah, I mean, that whole convincing her scene does last maybe 2 minutes, where she goes from, you have just broken into my hotel room, to, I'm going to help you escape this hotel. There's a lack of chemistry, yeah. I do think Joel McCrea is likable in the role. I don't think he's particularly great, but when you're opposite the likes of literally Shere Khan in George Sanders, you're gonna pale in comparison if you're not more than just likable.
Yeah, I should jump in here now and say as well, anyone who's seen Civil War, the kind of recent film from Alex Garland that came out, I suppose just if you like that movie, you might kind of get something out of this. They're kind of similar themes, kind of war correspondents, following journalists, that. So just if you like that movie, maybe check out this as well.
Yeah, for sure. So the 2 escape the hotel with the aid of a guy that works there, and they board a boat, and they agree to get married.
Yeah, out of nowhere. Out of nowhere.
Yeah. They agree to get married. I believe they've had 6 minutes of on-screen time together at this point, and they've agreed to get married.
The most abrupt engagement I've ever seen on screen. Ever.
No hesitation. Straight in there. Oh, what do you think about getting married? Yeah, I'd love to get married. Alright, I'd love to get married. They get married. If only it was that simple for every other Hitchcock character. I don't know. Maybe Anthony Perkins' character in Psycho, Norman Bates. If he could have just bumped into someone on a boat, that would have worked out way better for him than well, whatever happens in that film. No spoilers, of course. So yeah, on this boat that they board, they are going back to England because, well, they've realised now that with the information that our boy John Jones has, that these people are going to keep hunting him and try to assassinate him. So they go back to Carol's father, Stephen Fisher, who is the head of the UN type thing, the peaceful people. And they tell Stephen Fisher that he's still alive, but when they go to tell him that he's still alive, there's another guy in the sitting room called Mr. Krug. And Mr. Krug just so happened to be one of those guys in the windmill.
Yeah, played by Eduardo Cinelli, Mr. Krug.
Yeah, he's a performance that happens in the film.
He's
I can't
okay.
remember a single line of dialogue of his, but I'm sure he was fine. I just
He
don't
was fine,
remember
yeah.
much of him.
He was fine.
Was
he
he?
wasn't. He wasn't memorable. He wasn't terrible. He was just fine.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, dependable.
So yeah, they tell Stephen Fisher that Vandermeer is still alive, and these Nazi type dudes have him hostage, and he's like, "Okay, I got this." So then he goes in and tells Mr. Krug that they know that he's still alive because, oh my God, Stephen Fisher's a bad guy.
Who saw that coming?
Yes. The leader of the peaceful party is actually trying to incite the war. Yes, he's on Team Nazi, which is not a team that any of us are on. So yeah, Fisher goes back into the room to tell them, all right, don't you guys worry. You just need to lay low. So I'm going to get you a little bit of protection, a little bit of muscle. So he hires Rowley, a.k.a. Edmund Gwenn, a.k.a. Chris Kringle. Academy Award winner Edmund Gwenn is in this film. And he's not in it for long, but he is great as Rowley. I love him in this film.
He's terrific.
He is the worst assassin ever. He is paired with John Jones, and all he has to do is somehow kill him. And they get out, and he instantly pushes him in front of a truck, but pushes him, little old Edmund Gwenn pushes him too hard, that he pushes him past the oncoming truck. And it looks like he saves him.
What I love about this performance is you can see just the little subtle facial expressions that he gives. You can see like the cogs in his head, the cogs in the wheel turning. Like he sees a big building, he's like, oh, maybe we can go up there and I can push him off. And just it never works out the way. He's such a shambles of an assassin. So he provides light comic relief, even though you're supposed to care about the fate of Joel McCrea's character. I personally didn't that much.
No, me neither.
No, but he's just really good in this, Edmund Gwenn. Really good.
Yeah, and if it wasn't obvious enough that our boy Rowley was an assassin, when we get to this big tower that he wants to bring him up, he mentions that he had a mate who fell off a bridge in Switzerland, which was mentioned earlier, that the last time they had an issue with someone, they got an assassin to kill them on a bridge in Switzerland. And yeah, that was Rowley. Rowley actually did that to someone. But anyway, at the top of this tower that he wants to push our boy John Jones off of, there's a school tour, and Rowley, well, I don't know if he doesn't want the kids to see it, so like ruin their childhood, or if he just doesn't want to get caught. So he just waits, and then as soon as they leave, more people come. And then as soon as they leave, more people come. And Rowley's he's just stressed, because he knows he has to assassinate this guy, and he's just running out of time. So he just says, do you know what? Fuck it. And he runs as fast as he can, and falls off the tower and dies. In one of my favourite shots in the film, where you just see everybody look up at this tower and then a little figure just fall from the tower, and it's, I don't know, it's alluded to that it's our boy John Jones, but it was very obviously gonna be Rowley. And yes, Rowley, I don't know, afterwards John Jones like, yeah, I don't know why, I just kind of moved out of the way, and he just went over the railing. So I don't know how fast he was running that he couldn't stop himself, but he just basically launched himself off this tower. And that's the end of Rowley, aka Chris Kringle, aka Edmund Gwenn, aka Academy Award winner in this film.
It's such a good performance, such a fun performance.
Genuinely one of my favorites. I'm not even joking. He is really good. Our boy John Jones then goes back to Stebbins, who returns to this film for a little while, as well as George Sanders' character, Scott Folio. And he discovers that Scott Folio has kind of been on to these bad guys the whole time, and he's just kind of been keeping quiet. And Stebbins is also in the room. Good for Stebbins. He doesn't really do an awful lot. But basically, Folio and John Jones come up with this plan because John Jones has miraculously discovered that Edmund Gwent's character trying to kill him definitely means that his now future wife's dad was the guy behind it. Which, you know what, it's a rare bit of, like, I don't know, intelligence from a character in a Hitchcock film to just figure something out straight away.
Yeah.
Normally they spend most of the film trying to figure these kind of things out, but he just gets it the next scene. The next scene he's like, oh, that was clearly Fisher. That was Fisher who set that up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the plan is to kidnap Carol Fisher to get all the information they can get out of Stephen Fisher. But they don't actually want to kidnap Carol Fisher. So instead they just invite her out for a drive. And the plan is to just stall her in a motel. But Folio, who's then trying to ring Stephen Fisher to say, oh yeah, we have your daughter hostage, just can't get through to him. Which is just a funny real life thing that would happen. I like that a lot, actually. He's just trying to ring him all day to be like, yeah, we have your daughter hostage. He just can't get through to him. He's just been out all day.
Yeah, the film is sprinkled with these little moments of comedic kind of genius. Maybe genius has gone a bit too far, but it's definitely on the lighter side at times of a Hitchcock film, considering the subject matter.
Yeah. Yeah, very enjoyable. But just the romance just doesn't work, man.
No.
He is not the master of romance.
Absolutely.
And as a result of this, Folio's like, right, mate, you are just going to have to stall her even longer. I'm just going to go and meet him face to face. So Folio goes to meet him face to face. Meanwhile, Carol has overheard that John Jones is booking a new room for her overnight, and she's like, oh, he's using me. What a dick. Anyway, we go back to Folio and Fisher's back and forth, where Folio's trying to get information out of Fisher. Fisher kind of admits that he's a bad guy. Folio admits that he's not a spy, but like he's like kind of like a spy. I don't know, he's just an intelligent guy who's trying to figure this out, basically.
Yeah.
And as a result of their face-to-face, we think that we are going to find out where Van Meer has been kept, because he has been kidnapped this whole time. We have not seen him in the movie since we last saw him drugged in that windmill. And Fisher writes it on a card for him, and he's like, right, off you go. And on his way out, Folio gets met by Carol. Yes, Carol just left that motel. John Jones did a horrible job of stalling her because she managed to make it all the way home in time to intercept this face-to-face. Folio kind of plays it off and goes out, and then when he opens the note of where Van Meer is, it actually says, sorry, I heard my daughter's car coming. Oh, get burned. Poor Folio. He deserves better. So, yeah, Van Meer is still just very much kidnapped, and we have no idea where he is. Stephen Fisher then leaves the house because he is going to go to where Van Meer is, and in the meantime, Carol picks up the phone and hears that Krug is on the phone, and she, at this point, is already privy to the fact that Krug is a bad guy. So she kind of puts two and two together, but we don't see her for a while. Meanwhile, Folio tails Fisher and manages to get Stebbins to kind of get the police together to try and then tail him afterwards.
Yeah.
But, yeah, in most Hitchcock films, to be expected, this plan goes horribly wrong.
Yeah, so Folio manages to follow Stephen Fisher to this safe house where they're stashing Van Meer. Folio ends up walking in with a gun to his back, and Stephen Fisher tries to. At this point, Van Meer is just high on whatever the hell they've given him, whatever kind of hallucinogens or drugs they've given him. He still thinks that Stephen Fisher is his friend. So Stephen Fisher tries to basically coerce the secret kind of clause from
The MacGuffin.
the MacGuffin, exactly, yeah. Tries to basically coerce the MacGuffin out of Van Meer, and Van Meer initially is kind of doesn't want to give it. Stephen Fisher basically tries to say, "Oh, well, just give it to me, just give it to me. I'm your friend." Folio, the hero that he is, manages to blurt out at just the right moment that Stephen Fisher is not who he says he is, that he is a bad guy. For anyone who doesn't know what a MacGuffin is, basically it's a term invented as a plot device. It's basically a plot device which doesn't really have that much to do with the overall narrative. It's just a way to keep the narrative moving along. So in this case, that would be the clause from the supposed treaty agreement that the supposed peace nation is trying to bring into effect. And then that's when we get this brilliant monologue from Albert Basman. Probably the monologue which got him an Academy Award nomination, as we said earlier. In which he basically, definitely. He just waxes lyrical kind of, he just goes in this tirade against what we know is the Nazis. They never say the Nazis, of course, but we know that it's the Nazis.
But Hitler does get name dropped in the film.
He does get name dropped. A couple of little Van Meer quotes. There is no peace, only war and death. Beasts like you will devour each other. So it's kind of really strong on the anti-war message, which makes sense because it's kind of a propaganda war film if you really think about it. Certainly Hitchcock's way of kind of appealing to an American audience and to give a shit.
Trying to get the Americans to get involved.
Exactly. Luckily for us, our boy Folio manages to escape. They do still try to kill Van Meer.
At this point, we really realise Folio is the hero of this narrative. He's the main character. He's our boy. He is
definitely
Foreign Correspondent.
He is. If the film was revolved around Folio, to be honest, it would be. I mean, George Sanders is really, really good. It would just be such a more enjoyable film. Not to say I didn't enjoy it, which I did, but when you compare Folio to John Jones, it's really like, in terms of charisma, especially.
One of them feels like a side character, and one of them feels like a main character.
And it's not the one.
It's the other way around.
Yeah. And if it's just Folio being an investigative journalist, trying to bring down these Nazi bastards, to quote Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, if it's just that movie, it will be really good. But instead, the film wants to focus on the wrong character, and it wants to bring in a subplot about the romance, which doesn't work. By the way, I should mention at this point that in a few films' time, we're going to be focusing on Notorious. Kind of similar in themes because Ingrid Bergman's character is the daughter of a Nazi war criminal, and she falls in love with Cary Grant. Those two films, this film, Foreign Correspondent and Notorious, kind of interesting to when you watch them in relation to each other, because I think Notorious manages to be a lot more successful at similar themes. I would say the romance is just a lot stronger, the suspense is a lot better. It's just more suspenseful, more tense. Not to say that Foreign Correspondent doesn't succeed in a lot of these elements, but Notorious is just on another level, really, when you compare the two.
Yeah, like when you're comparing Joel McCrea and Lorraine Day to literally Ingrid Bergman and Cary Grant, you have two very different levels of chemistry there.
Incredible.
You have two very different qualities of acting there. You have two solid actors, and then you have two of the best of their generation in the same film.
So I'm not a huge Gary Cooper fan. I've only seen him in a couple of films, and I didn't really like either of them, if I'm being honest. And I mean, High Noon is good, but I'm not a huge fan of his performance. I know that might be a scandal for a lot of people, but maybe I need to watch it again. But I think Gary Cooper, actually, in terms of the way he managed to kind of internalise those kind of moral dilemmas, he would have been just better, in my opinion, than Joel McCrea.
Yeah, and the film got remade into a radio drama, and Joseph Cotton played the lead.
Oh, he's really
who would have been better than both of them.
Definitely.
Because Joseph Cotton is a class actor.
Joseph Cotton is a terrific actor. He would have been really good, actually. He would have.
So yeah, getting back to the narrative, and basically Folio in this great shot, manages to jump out the window through a canopy, and it looks great. And he goes straight to. Does he go to Stebbins, or does he go to a policeman who looks like Stebbins?
I think he goes to Stebbins. That's my memory of it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a guy that looks like Stebbins at the very least. And basically says, let's go to Scotland Yard. And the other guy goes, you have literally no evidence. Which is a fair point. But what they do have is Van Meer, because they managed to get Van Meer out. When Folio got those police to tail him, it worked. They got our boy out. Van Meer is now recovering in a home. And meanwhile, the next day, war is declared. Yes, the war has begun. We've already had like blitzes and that going on and blackouts, but this is war has been declared. And meanwhile, Carol and Stephen Fisher have boarded a plane to America. And on the exact same plane are John Jones and Folio. Yeah. Through some incredible, I don't know, just queuing 3 or 4 people behind them maybe to get onto the same plane as them without them spotting them. I don't know how you go through like a whole airport getting on the same flight as someone and then like them not seeing you the whole time. Anyway, they managed to get onto the same flight where when the telegrams are coming around the flight, because that's a thing that used to happen, Stephen Fisher sees Folio's name on a telegram and he's like, oh God. So he looks at the telegram and the telegram basically reads, Van Meer has recovered and we are waiting on the other side for Fisher. We're going to arrest him, don't you worry. And this is where Fisher kind of tries to redeem himself at first by just apologizing to his daughter for getting into bed with the Nazis. And she's like, I forgive you. So, what the fuck, Carol? No.
Again, this is where Notorious, not to keep coming back, well, we'll come to it in a few. It's a really good Hitchcock film. That kind of deals with the moral kind of dilemmas of Ingrid Bergman's character a lot better, because we'll see as we come to it. It's not a spoiler because it's in the first few minutes of the film, but she basically hates her father. So it's just, I don't know, if I found out my dad was a Nazi and was a fucking war criminal and whatever, wanted to take over all of Europe, then I don't think I'd take too kindly to that personally. But look,
I wouldn't just forgive him straight away after
I don't think
the first apology, you know?
No, I don't think so.
So, getting back into the narrative, basically, she just forgives him for being a Nazi, and so our 2 boys, Folio and John Jones, come up to their part of the airplane because they realise, this is a 14-hour flight. What's the point in us just still hiding from them? It's not like they can go anywhere. And as a result of this, basically, John and Carol kind of clear the air, forgive each other. Oh, it was all a big miscommunication. I thought you were a reporter using me to get to my dad, who's also a secret agent. And he's like, oh, no, I'm just a reporter who kind of was wrong place at the wrong time, because it's a Hitchcock film and there's always got to be one of those guys. And just when everything seems to be going swell, the plane starts to get shot by a ship in the sea. And again, another moment of absolute hilarity. Just this random woman starts running her mouth and miraculously is the only person to get hit by a bullet from that ship. It just shoots the wall, leaves a lot of big holes in the wall, and the only one to get shot is that one woman running her mouth. That was pretty funny.
It's funny because the film itself is obviously a propaganda piece to get Americans to give a shit, like we said, about the war. But then you have like a genuinely funny visual gag like that, and it's like kind of, it probably undercuts what Hitchcock is trying to do, but it is funny at the same time. So, you know.
And so after the plane's getting shot, it's going down, and then in one of the best shots of the film, because of how it was made, which is just very interesting to me, we see the plane hit the water. And basically the way it was done all in one take, which looks great, is Hitchcock had this big water tank constructed, and then there was this paper thin layer of like a reflective screen that they were showing the water getting closer to them on, so that once the plane hits the water, basically once the reflection of the screen is entirely zoomed in, Hitchcock then pressed a button and water shot out of the tank and actually went through the paper screen, destroying the paper screen and in through the cockpit. And they achieved that in one take, which is just very impressive to me.
Yeah,
Anyway,
the visual stunts and the physicality of this closing act, these last couple of scenes, is really like something you don't associate too often with Hitchcock. It's more about what you don't see in a lot of ways, but this is like a really good, impressive physical stunt that kind of does. If the woman getting shot kind of undercuts uh, what the message of the film because of how funny it is, this actually does bring it back because it's quite immersive. You do feel like you're in this sea with them at the time, panicking, struggling to stay afloat. So it's genuinely really impressive filmmaking from Hitchcock when this isn't the kind of stuff you usually associate with him.
yeah, it's actually aged well as
Yeah.
well, which no harm to him, but Hitchcock did use a fair rake of green screen in his time, particularly in the 30s and 40s, and some of it is very blatant these days.
Yeah.
But this whole last act still looks great. It really does. So when these survivors get out of the plane, which is now sinking in the water, they discovered that if they all go onto the wing, they can stay afloat. So they all get over there onto the wing, and then they realize that one of the pilots still hasn't made it. And as he's swimming across, someone shouts, "Oh, one more person, and this thing's gonna sink." And everybody's like, "Oh, shut up! We'll take him on anyway. We'll take him on anyway." But our noble Nazi, Stephen Fisher, kind of quietly just slides himself off the wing in a bit of a attempting to redeem himself moment. And yeah, he sacrifices himself to save the pilot. So good for him. And the pilots makes it over, and then a ship which is just passing by, which is friendly, takes them all on board, and they all survive. Hooray!
Yeah, and it's an American
Well, except
ship.
for Stephen, he didn't survive, but the rest of them survived. Hooray!
Yeah, exactly. And it's an American ship as well, so we get to a scene where the ship's captain won't actually let uh, John Jones kind of take down notes about what happened and send it back because at the time America was neutral in the war. So there's that whole kind of thing as well. The ship's captain is obviously clearly being positioned by Hitchcock to be in the wrong. So clever old John Jones, what does he do? He's already on the phone to his editor, so he basically hides the phone. And he and Folio recount the story of what happened to the captain in such a way that his editor and his editor's clerks or whatever she is are able to take down what happened, record what happened in such a way that it's comical and it's also factually accurate. The captain doesn't have a clue what's going on. He doesn't realise the whole chicanery of what's involved here. It's clever, and Joel McCrea plays it really well. It's one of his probably
Yeah,
better
he does.
scenes. It's one of his better scenes in the film. George Sanders, as usual, throughout the film, as we saw in Rebecca as well, just slays. So it's a really nice little moment to kind of tie up what happened on the sea, and yeah, it's a way of getting it's a way for Hitchcock to kind of appeal to the American audience to, as we said, give a shit.
Yeah, because then the final scene, the climax of the film, he's now a bit of a star. Is our John Jones, or well, he's still now going under the name of Huntley Haverstock because he's a star after his incredible correspondence, and he's giving this big emphatic radio chat about the war and what's going on. And the blitz then occurs and they're getting bombed, but he refuses to move because he knows that even though all the English aren't listening because they're busy getting into their shelters, the Americans are still listening. So the film just ends with him doing this again. He's good in this scene as well.
Yeah.
Him just giving this monologue as the lights are all being turned off and as the building's being bombed. He stands firm, and then I kind of sorry to our American audience here, I burst out laughing then when Star Spangled Banner plays and then the end credit is a big eagle. I was like, Alfred, mate, you couldn't be like more on the nose here. This is hilarious. Like, I know he just wants the Americans to get involved in the war, and that's the whole purpose of the film. But still, there's still like a filmmaking element of it where you can try and be a bit more subtle than playing the American anthem and just having this big random eagle at the end.
Yeah, it's not the
I
most subtle
found that
moment.
so funny.
It's not the most subtle moment of his filmography.
No, definitely not. And yeah, that is the end of Foreign Correspondent. Shane, what did you think of the film?
Yeah, it's an enjoyable film. Mid-tier Hitchcock, I would say. It's not terrible. It's not outstanding. It's just a good film that you can watch. Again, if the romance, if you don't watch your films for the romance, you'll probably get more out of this. If you're looking for the romantic element more so, in my opinion, it doesn't really work as well. Yeah, but as I said earlier, so Notorious kind of deals with a lot of the same themes. Maybe not in as comedic a way, of course, but we'll get to Notorious. But I think Notorious pulled off a lot of themes of the film better. So I'd give it 3.5 stars out of 5. So it's a good film, like I said, that you can watch. An enjoyable little entry in Hitchcock's oeuvre, but nothing probably outstanding, nothing that is particularly worth harping on it though.
Yeah, for me, I think George Sanders is definitely the standout, although I did really love Edmund Gwenn in his cameo. He was hilarious. The leads, as Hitchcock said, to paraphrase him a bit, Joel McCrea is likable, but it would have been better with bigger stars. I agree. I do think the romance element fails in the same way he succeeded in doing the whirlwind romance in the film of the same year in Rebecca. He does nowhere near as good a job at the whole whirlwind romance thing in this film. There's no chemistry, there's no build up, there's not even like a first kiss. They just get married straight away, which is just a huge leap for the audience to find believable and relatable. There's nothing believable or relatable about that relationship, in my opinion. I do think though that Joel McCrea is solid and likable, but when you're dealing with Alfred Hitchcock's filmography, you are dealing with lead performances from the Jimmy Stewarts of the world, the Cary Grants of the world, the Anthony Perkins of the world, the Gregory Pecks of the world. So if you're just likable and decent, your performances just kind of dissipate when people think about great Hitchcock male lead performances, in my opinion. So yeah, I also gave it 3.5 stars because I do think it works as a thriller. It's a fun thriller, and I found this movie to be one of Hitchcock's funnier films, if I'm honest. There was a lot of comedy in here that was just stupid, and I found it enjoyable. It's, again, similar to how people don't really like Jamaica Inn because of how stupid and silly and funny it is. I can see why people just don't outwardly like Foreign Correspondent, although it does seem to have a much better reputation than Jamaica Inn. I do just find the stupid humor funny in this occasion. I don't know what it is. I like it. I think it's funny. I think the romance fails, but I think overall, as a Hitchcock movie, it's a solid entry from Hitchcock. It's actually better. It's a good Hitchcock film. It's just not one of his best, and it's not great. It's good. Foreign Correspondent is good.
Definitely.
So yeah, next Friday, 6 p.m. GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, we are covering the original Mr. and Mrs. Smith, as well as mentioning the various remakes, or the various prominent remakes of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So until then, thank you very much, guys, and yeah, see you next week.
See you, everyone.